he says he didn't use the rights. He says he's not going to take money from them for the sake of the gospel. And then he says there's a great reward in doing it that way because he's able to offer it for free, the gospel for free. Then he says in verse 19, he's going to change gears again. He says, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I myself not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in its blessings. So Paul, and maybe not shifting gears, maybe that's a poor way to put it, but in a conclusionary idea, he says this, again, linking this back with chapter 8 and all through chapter 9, he says, look, though I am free from all and belong to no one. So guess what? Constitutionally, in the U.S., you're free from all, right? Biblically, after your salvation, you're free from all. Paul says, I don't owe anybody anything. I don't belong to anyone. And he says, even though that's who I am, his rights as a person, they're a little bit different than a Roman. He's a Roman citizen. But he says, I don't owe anybody anything. But he says, even though I don't owe anybody anything, I make myself a slave to everyone. That really grinds us. It can, though, can it? We go, I don't know about that. That's some crazy talk right there. And the word doulos here, so it's a Greek word, and it's the word he uses most often when he uses the word slave. If you go back and you look at a lot of the introductory or introductions to his letters, it'll say Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, or he'll say Paul, a slave of Jesus Christ. And it's that word, doulos. And it literally means, there's some translations render, I think the Darby translation renders it bondslave, or bondservant in other translations. So it's a Greek word that's a reference back to a Hebrew idea. And it's the idea, so it's in the Jewish law, there's really no social safety nets, right? So if someone is destitute, having trouble, these type of things, there's no central government office to go and get help or something like that. And there were different things like you could collect from a field and different things like that, but that may not be enough to feed your family and so forth. So anybody could do it. You could be a man or a woman. But typically as a father, if you're doing poorly, your family's starving, you go to, say, your neighbor who's like this incredible botanist and farmer, and they just, they have this incredible harvest, and you can't seem to grow anything. And you could go to them and you could say, I will sell myself to you as an indentured servant. And in exchange for me selling myself to you, and there were laws about it. They couldn't mistreat you. There's a lot of laws around it in the law. And you would sell yourself to them, and you could only be sold for a maximum of 7 years, one day short of 7 years. And then every 7 years, every single person was to be released from their servitude. But in exchange for my servitude, that person would take care of my family. They would make sure my family was fed and sheltered and all those different things. That was how the social safety net worked in Israel. But if I decided, I was like, man, this guy treats me so good. He's so kind, and he's taking care of my family so well. And man, I can just, you know what? I'm just going to lump my land in with his land, and I just want to keep on serving this guy. You could do that. And it was called a bondservant. And what you would do is you'd go to the elders of that particular village, your village, and you would say, my master takes care of me, and I don't ever want to not serve him. I want to serve him for the rest of my life. And so the elders would take you to the front of his house. They'd stick your ear up against the doorpost, and they would drive an awl through your ear and pin you to the doorpost. Thanks. That's great. And they would put a gold ring in. And so the gold ring represented the kindness of your master and that you were a bondslave, that you would never be released from your servitude, and that person would always take care of your family. And so when you went to the market or any place like that, you're going to a bazaar, if you went to the temple for a mandatory feast, people would see that gold ring and they knew exactly what it meant, that you served someone who was an incredibly kind person. So that's the word that he uses. So over and over again, Paul says, I'm a doulos, a bondslave of Jesus Christ, a willing servant of the most kind master that's ever been. But in this case, he says, I make myself a doulos of everyone. But I like his reality because he says that I might save some. Some people will not appreciate that. Some people will not care that you're serving them. Some people will not care that you're kind to them. Some people just don't want to be helped, and it just is what it is. But this concept, and this, man, are we even willing for this? Are we even willing? This is something that's so easy just to read and go, well, that was good for Paul. God bless you in that. But do we really believe that this is a real scenario for life? Do we really believe? And that doesn't mean like I subject myself to everyone for abuse or I give away everything I ever have. We're not saying that. We're saying that we take every opportunity that we can and we look at people over and over again, as the New Testament says, as more excellent than ourselves. That we can look at another human being and say, you're more important than me. We can look at them and say, I'm willing to serve you for the sake of Christ. I'm willing to pour out my life for you. In Philippians, Paul says, I pour out my life like a drink offering. It's oil or wine. It was over sacrifices. Certain sacrifices, the priest would pour out oil and wine on the sacrifice while it was already burning on the altar. And Paul says, if my life is poured out like a sacrifice, like a drink offering, then it's good. That's what I looked for. And so we just need to honestly ask ourselves, are we even willing for that? And if the answer is no, let's be real about it. If the answer is yes, let's be real about it. But if the answer is no, I'm not willing to do that, we need to ask ourselves why. Why are we not willing to do that? If that's what Jesus said, right? If Jesus told us to take up our cross daily, literally grab the most painful implement of death, of the death penalty that there is, and carry it every day. Clearly, he was not saying literally, you need to make yourself a cross, and then you need to carry it around. He was saying that we would daily be willing to be lifted up for his sake. That we would be willing to die painful deaths. Not just in like the romantic idea of being a martyr, like, oh, someday I'll run out for the faith and everybody will be like, oh, that guy's so faithful. Not something weird like that. Honestly, I think that would be the easy part. I think the hard part is, are we willing to love the people we don't? Are we willing to agape the people that wrong us? Are we willing to say, I'll go the extra mile so that this person can know Jesus? Are we willing to say, I'm willing to lay down myself so they can hear the gospel for free? And if the answer is no, then the next question is, what do you think is better than that? Or what do I think is better than that? What is better than what Jesus said? Is it better to ignore God's people? Is that what's better? Is it better to strive for something that I think will gratify me, whether it be booze or drugs or Netflix or relationships or sex or whatever it might be? Is it better to pursue those things? Will I really get to the end of my life and see Jesus and think to myself, doggone it, I wish I had focused more on myself? Heaven is such a waste. And so are you, Jesus. So is your fellowship. I can't believe I wasted my life on you. I don't think any of us will say that. I don't think anybody will see the risen Christ and think to themselves, what a waste. It would have been way better if I kept pursuing the things I know in the end don't help me and don't satisfy me. But isn't that what we do? We do it in small ways, though. We do it when we rage on people. We elevate ourselves because I'll be better off if I judge and rage. We do it in small ways by maybe not helping people that we could because we say, it'd be better off if I sat on my couch rather than going out and doing that. We make small decisions. And we say, I'm not your servant. Who do you think you are? I'm not your servant. How could you treat me that way? And Paul's saying, look, I've laid down my life.